Hi there, viewers. Today, I'm joining a conversation with author Kelvin Conyers. It's a pleasure to have Kelvin featured on P English Literature. Welcome on the show, Kelvin.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate you for taking out the time on your busy schedule to have me, man. It's definitely very appreciative.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. So, Kelvin, could you tell us about your book, The Untold Story of the Ugly Ducklings? How does this book come about? I mean, what inspired you to write this book?
A lot of things inspired me to write this book over the years. It's something that it took some time for me to get out. It took some years. It took about 30 plus years in order for me to write this book. Of course, it's a below the surface memoir. Um, it's about things that we go things that happen in our lives, you know what I'm saying? Like things that we don't necessarily see or understand. That's why I say it's below the surface. Of course, when you look at the average human being, the things that we go through as far as mental health, drug and alcoholism, lack of mentors, the importance of education, the
Mm.
decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. It's about finances, but more importantly, the biggest thing that I touch on within the book is identity, and that's one of the biggest things that goes unheard of. It goes unsolved as far as like mental health. We don't necessarily talk about these things, so like it's just a deep view within my psyche as I was a youth.
That's great. That sounds very intriguing and quite fascinating. And this one make me to ask that for readers like me who haven't read the book yet, without giving much information away, would we have a sneak of what we'd expect picking up the book?
Of course, man. Of course. Like I said, it's a memoir from my life from early 90s, maybe late 80s up until 2019. So of course, like it took a whole lot to write that book. It took me to be very vulnerable. It took, me taking the time to sit down to think about, hey, you have a story to tell. Why not be the first to tell it? And it largely stems from my childhood growing up back home down south in South Carolina, as far as like my upbringing, as far as breaking generational curses. That's the biggest intent right there for me, because a lot of times where we see like within the youth or any population for that matter, but especially Black culture, sometimes we don't necessarily jump off the porch. And what I mean jump off the porch, like leave our comfort zone as far as the things that our values, our beliefs. Sometimes we hold those things so tight to the point where we can't see our
Mm.
lives in no way, no shape, form, or fashion outside of our norms. And so this book, it touches on that largely because it doesn't necessarily have how can I say it? It's not for everybody, but at the same time, anyone can read it.
I really love the sound of that. And this one to make me
Appreciate
to ask you another question. As authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism. I just want to make me to ask you, how do you react to, criticism, negative criticism of your book if you've ever received one in time past?
Well, to be honest with you, um, for the most part, it hasn't been much negative feedback. I wouldn't say any negative feedback. I don't view any feedback as negative. It's all with the attitude and mindset associated with what people tell me as far as what they thought of the book. Um, the few that I would say, I wouldn't even say negative. You know what I'm saying? It's an oxymoron. Uh, but the few things that the things that people did tell me, as far as like there's an issue, there's a few grammatical errors, like maybe three, maybe four throughout the book. So of course I had it I chose we call it an editor, but of course I believe when they gave me the work back, and then the work as far as like the original that I sent them, I think it might have merged just a little or something like that as far as the Word document that I had
Mm.
back then. So but other than that, as far as the feedback and criticism, for the most part, it's been great. Um, I do plan to relaunch the book again in the near future. So that's something else that I'm also excited about, to get it to a more, you know, bigger audience.
Yeah. That sounds great. That sounds quite intriguing. And yeah, and I also want to ask you, could you tell us how your career as a soldier influenced your writing? Because I realized that, some bit of an author's life might be reflected actually in his writing. I just want to make me to ask how your career as a soldier influenced your writing so far. Would you love to talk about that?
Oh yeah, most definitely. So there's a few chapters in this book where I talk about, deploying and going overseas into places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait.
Oh,
And
wow.
I talk about my experiences in those places. And of course, the very first one, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but the very first one, it was initially stepping into the country, I was afraid, and then I realized it wasn't as bad as what they say it was on the news. But of course, the military is structured a certain way. So if that's not what you do, that's not what you're going to see. So, of course, the very next deployment, which is 12 months after returning from the first one, like it shows the dangers of wearing a uniform. So, of course, I have buddies that poke fun and jokes at the last three that I talk about in the actual book because it wasn't in any sort of danger and that sort of thing because of course they walk on the wild side. But to me, when it boils down to mental health, because that's one of the things that I talk about in the book. Those last three took a weight were especially my hardest. And I talk about those and how I overcame those challenges of adversity and things like that and became to get back on my feet as far as, being mentally and spiritually healthy, especially emotionally, especially because those are things that we don't necessarily talk about. And as you can see, you probably look at the cover,
Yeah.
like as a matter of fact, the the actual person that did the book cover is a young Haitian artist, Naderson Saint Pierre. The actual name of this work that I use of his is called "Boys Don't Cry," and it ties into the broader picture of what I was trying to convey within the book. So I thought it fit very perfectly. But
Hmm.
as far as military life, I talk about that somewhat a good series of chapters in there. Not too in depth, but as far as like when I was overseas in those said combat zones, I talk about my experiences, other people's experiences around me, so on and so forth. So it gives you like an up close picture of what it would be like to be in a place like that during a time like that.
That's very great. And that sounds like a lot of an experience. And now I just want to ask you to, hold the book and bring the cover close to the camera so
Of
viewers
course.
can see properly. The Untold Story of Ugly Ducklings. That's great. Yeah, you can take it back. That's fine. Love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I also see that, writing memoirs can be very difficult. It can be such, a lot of tasks, a lot of works, and all of that. And this want to make me to ask if you have any challenges that you've experienced while putting your work together and writing this book. Would you love to talk about that too?
Man, this book was very challenging. I'll be the first to tell you. It was challenging in more than one way. The first way was because I didn't write it in a linear format. Like I hopped around a lot, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in lieu of that, the very emotion that I had to go through in order to, relive those experiences that I had that I shared in the book, I had to actually like mentally be there. So of course, like it really threw off my mood. A lot of the times I was writing this book, I wrote most of it, I believe, in 2020 during the quarantine and that sort of thing, because of course we had a whole lot of extra time. So that was very beneficial in itself. So yeah, it definitely it was definitely a challenge because of course, you know, when you go through certain things and you experience issues where as far as like, behavioral health, mental health, and you have people that depend on you
Mm.
from, above, below you, laterally, any way that you can possibly think of, it puts a whole lot of weight on your shoulders. And, a part of what I talk about in the book, throughout the book, actually, is about education and mentorship. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not. I'm pretty sure some of your audience has probably heard of W.B. Du Bois, The Soul of Black Folk, where he tells a story, the coming of John, and the
Oh,
coming of John. It talks about uh, two guys from the same place going into an education, being educated and then coming back home, and how the people who they use once associated with, whether family or friends, how they interact with them. You know what I'm saying? And I could understand and connect with that. You know what I'm saying? On
Mm,
both aspects of it, you know what I'm saying? So as far as like education is very, very important. And I know today is almost said Malcolm, Martin Luther King's birthday, and he was a huge advocate of education, him as well as Malcolm X, and those are just
mhm,
two of my many heroes. And I also am, a result of education coming from nothing. So that's one of the biggest messages that I'd like to put out there to the youth, because a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm not experiencing any life altering events or no challenges or that sort of thing. So why should I have a mentor? You know what I'm saying? The same
mm.
way, if you're not feeling well, you should go get an annual checkup at some point in time just to make sure that you're
Absolutely.
healthy. So
Yeah.
a lot of people, they overlook the idea of getting a mentor because they feel like their life isn't in shambles. So why should they have someone telling them what direction they should be going?
Mm. Wow. I really, really love the sound of this book and all that you've talked about so far. They sound very intriguing and something that I feel that it would really interest quite a lot of people out there. Thank you very much
Right.
for this. It's quite amazing. Now,
Thank
could,
you.
could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? What are the challenges that you've encountered in terms of marketing your books, and what are the mediums you've utilized so far in promoting the untold story of the Duckling?
So as far as publishing, at first I was seeking maybe someone would buy into the idea. That didn't work out too well. A couple of what do you call it? What do you call those guys? A couple of those they reached out to me. They told me to pitch me their idea, and if they liked it, they would give me a call. And I started thinking, those good drives on the way home from work and whatnot. And I started thinking, like, if they like it, like, what is there to dislike? This is my life story. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not seeking
Absolutely.
to appeal to
Oh yeah.
someone that's in an office somewhere or
Mm,
driving a luxury driven vehicle, chauffeur driven vehicle to, like it's my audience is people who used to, or people who are in the situation and circumstances that I've overcame in my life.
mm,
That's who I'm seeking to reach out to. So after a while, I nipped that idea as far as seeking some outside agency to help me with that idea. And I went with a 48-hour publishing, self-publishing company, and I did it that way. Um, so as far as some of the avenues that I've been through to promote the idea, of course, social media, word of mouth, speaking at some public events, things of that nature, mainly just talking to the young people, because at the end of the day, the intent is to get the young people back into reading. Of course, we live in this generation nowadays where everybody is, they want everything the fast way. They
mm.
want everything right there in their fingertips. So there's nothing wrong with that, because of course we live in the age of information where you can have books on your phone right now. You know what I'm saying? You can read an ebook on PDF on your phone or whatever device
Absolutely.
that you might have, and there's nothing wrong with that. But people don't actually read anymore.
Mm,
And that's one of the things, that was one of the my main and biggest concerns when it came to reading the book, is writing it in a captivating way to the point where how we used to be as kids, looking at or reading Goosebumps books. Oh, I can't wait to get to the next chapter. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? You say, hey,
Yeah.
I'll give myself a week or 2 weeks to read this book. Next thing you know, you can't put it down since you got it from the library with your library card,
Absolutely.
which is something that is
Yeah.
very rare nowadays. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it
That's
really
true.
truly is.
Yeah.
So, I made it a point, a huge point within myself to make sure that it's written very captivating. It's almost like reading a movie, an action-packed movie on top of that. So, like, I really wanted it to be, a good representation of my life, but not to the point where, people will get the wrong idea. And honestly, a huge part of me had to be very vulnerable when it came to that, because I didn't necessarily want people to get the wrong idea. So to which extent that's whatever is on that's on them, whoever, decides to get the wrong idea from the book. But at the end of the day, it's about transformation.
Mm.
And like I said, it's not necessarily a book that's going to capture someone that wears a suit and tie to work every day. It's going to capture the attention of someone that's young, someone that's looking for a transformational change within themselves, someone that's looking to break a generational curse. That is the impact of that is the life that I want to impact.
That's quite amazing. That's quite amazing.
Appreciate
That's a lot to digest, actually.
it. Mhm.
Now, I also want to ask you, is there
Thank you.
anything that you would love to share with the viewers concerning your book that we couldn't mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know?
Well, I'm actually working on a series of books, of course, one at a time. I'm not the type of person to dance around like how I used to, especially with this book right here. Like, it's very emotionally draining and stressful to hop around and make sure that this right here is in the right place, is that where it needs to be, so on and so forth. You didn't introduce this character before it should have been introduced, so on and so forth. But the second book that I'm working on, it's an extension of this book. It's not a memoir though; it's a personal development book. Um,
Mm.
it's a self-help book. I haven't copyrighted the title yet, or as well as the series of titles that I plan to do here on after. But it's a self-help book. I plan to release it in about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't want to rush it. I felt like this book right here was maybe a bit rushed. You know what I'm saying? Of course, I had almost all of the time in the world to work on it because of COVID and whatnot. Because of course we were at home. We weren't doing anything.
Mhm.
If you weren't an essential worker, then hey, you get that free salary. But other than that, so some of the things that I talk about in this book, as far as identity and decisions, those things are very, very, very important as far as the youth and the person who I aim to target with the book. So something that they don't know, um, the book has an ending that ties into the very next one, but this right here is a memoir. The second one isn't a memoir in no way, shape, or form. Of course, I talk about my experiences in this book, in the second book, as far as like say for instance, this is a book of how I screwed up and started to get my life together. And this is how I actually did it. These are some things that you can do. In the second book, I talk about a lot of the things that I initially mentioned in this one, as far as mental health, as far as identity, as far as education, the decisions, the vices that we have, education, and especially finances. Like those are the biggest things. And of course, the book is in every chapter you can find leadership, resilience, and vulnerability. Those things are extremely important to me and the people who, I feel like the book would definitely benefit. And of course, it goes beyond that. Like anyone can read the second book. So I believe that I definitely have something that is great and definitely deserves to be read.
That's great. That's quite fascinating. That's very intriguing. And now, I just want to make me to ask you, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling to publishing a book like yours? What do you tell people in this category?
Um, Man, where do I begin? Begin anywhere.
Okay.
I'm taking advice. Begin anywhere. A lot of people, when you want to do something, sometimes, you start thinking about the magnitude of the project or whatever goal that you have in mind. Um, you have to start somewhere. The first place that I started was creating the outline and putting everything that I felt needed to be in there. And of course, that outline serves as, direction for where you want to go and for who you want to target and what you want to talk about.
Mm.
So I would say start there. Secondly, another thing is if you're writing a book, you also want to be reading as well. You want to study how other authors prepare their paragraphs, their sentences, their transition statements, so on and
Yeah.
so forth. How they begin chapters, how they in chapters, so on and so forth, how they introduce characters, how they describe their characters, so on and so forth. So those are just some of the happy mediums that I actually do when I go about as far as putting one together. As far as publishing, um, it would definitely, I would say it definitely depends on the end state. Like if you're about with it for the money, you want, people to, how can I say it? You're doing it for income. I would say, hey, find an agent or maybe even go independent. But of course, uh, for me, it's more about the message. So that's one of the reasons why I went with the self-publishing
Yeah.
style. It's more about the message. I don't necessarily uh, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't want the money, but of course, the message is more important than the income. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, so whatever the writer whatever they're seeking is, it's really incumbent upon whether they are doing it for income or whether they're doing it for the message. I'm going to leave it like that.
Yeah. It actually sounds quite amazing. Thanks for adding that. Now, tell us, Kelvin, where can readers get a copy of your book?
If you go on Amazon, if you go on Amazon and you type in either my name, Kelvin Conyers, that's KelvinConyers, or just type in the Untold Story of the Ugly Duckling, you'll be able to find a copy of the book and purchase it, so on and so forth. At the moment, it's solely on Amazon. Later on this year, I plan to create a website so that way I can sell to bigger bookstores, independent bookstores,
Yeah.
as well as maybe local readers, whatever the case might be, or anywhere in the world. Because Amazon, I already knew it was a greedy beast, but of course, I don't care about the income aspect of it. I care about getting the message out there because, of
Mm.
course, that is probably the most effective medium as far as distribution nowadays. For now, for now. So I'm definitely looking for other avenues to expand in my reach.
Yeah, it's great. And for viewers who would love to get a copy of the book, I left a link in the description part of this interview to the book's page in Amazon where you can get a copy directly. So thank you so much, Kelvin, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. It's been a great pleasure, man. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Author to author.
Yeah. So that's that.